All right, let's get right into this. We're talking about a warlord, an emperor, and a flawed genius, and how this one family didn't just carve out a kingdom during one of China's most violent times, but also managed to create an entire literary era with their words. This is the incredible story of the three cows. You know how we say, speak of the devil? Well, in China, this is pretty much the same thing. And that one phrase tells you just about everything you need to know about the reputation of the guy at the head of this family, Cao Cao. For centuries, really, his name has meant treachery and ruthless ambition. He's the main villain in operas, the undisputed bad guy in famous novels. But that popular image, well, it's hiding a much more fascinating story. Because this same notorious warlord, along with his sons, Cao Pi and Cao Zhi, were also these sensitive, totally groundbreaking poets. So how do those two things even exist in the same family, let alone in the same person? To figure that out, we have to start with the patriarch. Okay, so Cao Cao, he's the one who started it all. He was this immensely complex figure, feared and admired, and a lot of the time for the exact same reasons. The thing you really have to get about him is this duality. I mean, he was a master of the sword and the brush. To really understand him, you have to look at both of his faces. His rise to power was just paved with cunning and pure absolute resolve. Get this, even as a kid, he faked a seizure just to get his tattling uncle in trouble. As a young commander, he had a really powerful official beaten to death just for breaking curfew. He even had an envoy killed because the guy made a comment about his appearance. This was a man who clawed his way to the top of a very, very chaotic world. And yet, this is what that same man wrote. This isn't some conqueror gloating over his victory. This is the deep, profound grief of someone who's witnessed incredible suffering. His poetry shows us a man who was deeply, deeply affected by the devastation of the wars he himself was fighting. And this right here, this shows you that other side of him perfectly. It's a real, tangible piece of his artistic soul. The same hand that pointed armies into battle and signed death warrants could also create characters with this much power and grace. It's just incredible. Now, this might be his most famous line. It just perfectly captures his spirit, right? This undying ambition that refused to be held back by age or anything else. He wasn't just a ruthless warlord. In his own mind, he was the hero of his own epic story. But what about the next generation? Let's move on to his sons. Because this legacy of ambition and art played out in this really bitter rivalry for power between two brothers who could not have been more different. On one side, you had Cao Pi. He was calculating, disciplined, a real political operator. And on the other side was Cao Zhi. He was just pure, raw genius. Impulsive, brilliant, and for a long time, definitely his father's favorite. And their poetry, just as different as they were, which really set the stage for a huge conflict. First, let's look at the brother who actually won the political prize. That's Cao Pi, the one who would go on to become the very first emperor of the state of Wei. But what's really interesting here is the kind of pressure Cao Pi must have been under. I mean, he gets the ultimate power. He's the emperor. But in the world of literature, he's stuck between his larger-than-life dad and his prodigy of a younger brother. So he had to find his own way to make a mark. So he writes this really groundbreaking essay called On Literature, and in it, he makes a super bold claim. He says that writing, literature, is just as important as running the state. He argued that a great poem could make you immortal, a legacy that has nothing to do with thrones or armies. It was totally his way of carving out his own path to greatness. And you can see this thoughtful approach in his poetry. He was like a professional writer. He could skillfully craft the emotions of other people, like this pining wife in his most famous poem. See, he didn't just feel poetry, he studied it, he perfected it, and he made it his own kind of empire. So while Cao Pi was building his legacy with discipline, his brother, Cao Zhi, was relying on pure, untamed talent. A true genius whose brilliance was really only matched by his own self-destructive impulses. So, Cao Zhi was the favorite, no question. His mind was incredibly sharp. His talent was just undeniable. But man, he was reckless. He drank way too much, lived for pleasure, and had zero discipline. The final straw? He drunkenly drove his carriage through a palace gate that was reserved only for his father, the ruler. That one act of pure arrogance just completely destroyed his father's trust for good. And this massive conflict wasn't just in his life, it was the very soul of his poetry. Unlike his brother, Cao Zhi's poems are super autobiographical. They basically show you these two different men fighting for control inside of him.
First, you get the hero. In poems like White Horse, he writes about this fearless knight, a warrior who would gladly sacrifice his life for his country. This is the son Cao Cao wanted as his heir. This is the ideal.
But then, you get this guy, the one who describes these lavish feasts, crazy expensive wine, and the decadent life of a playboy. This is the impulsive, self-indulgent man who ended up losing everything. His poetry just lays that internal battle completely bare. So, at the end of the day, you've got a ruthless patriarch, a calculating emperor, and a flawed genius. Three very different men, but their stories all come together to create this one incredible shared legacy.
Decades later, another famous poet put it perfectly. He basically said that Cao Zhi's talent was so huge, so immense, it was almost superhuman. So yeah, he might have lost the throne, but he definitely won a different kind of immortality.
And together, the three Chaos created what we now call the Gen-On style. It was a brand new way of writing poetry. It was direct, it was powerful, and it was deeply personal. People said it had air and bone, meaning it had this strength and spirit that just perfectly captured the heroic and tragic feeling of their time. In the end, the Chaos left behind two empires. One was forged from steel and strategy, and like all empires, it eventually crumbled to dust. But the other one? That one was built from ink and emotion, and it has lasted for centuries.